Right, so another mad weekend of hurling. Half the games called off, but sure, we'll look at the ones that weren't called off and just run through the results quickly. Cork 312, Westmeath 114, Clare 17 points, Laois 9, Wexford 116, Kilkenny 114, and Dublin 20 points, Carlow 9. Michael, what did you make of the weekend's fixtures? Is there any performance that particularly stood out to you?
No, I tell you what, just even going through the results, like there was obviously only two goals over the three games, which was a bit mad. I suppose maybe to do with the weather, maybe to do with the weather conditions as well. What stood out for me, just how difficult it is to play in those type of conditions. Just even watching back the Wexford Kilkenny game, and you're just thinking it's nearly a game of possession. You are nearly trying to run down the clock. You're nearly trying to be as smart as you can against the breeze and run it down, take time with puck outs, free sidelines, everything like that. That's the way it is. You're just basically hanging in until you get the breeze. I thought Wexford were very, very smart. Both with and against the breeze, and they were then able to show an awful lot of character, an awful lot of resilience, and bring on a lot of their best players just to finish out the game, particularly when they're playing into the teeth of that breeze in the second half. I thought that was smart. It was good kind of game management. They brought the lads on when they needed them most, and in fairness, they got that kick at the end that they needed to get over the line. And I think it was important for them to get a victory. And you could see that after, again, not that Davy has the jinx over Cody, but I think it's 9. I think they're undefeated in their last 9 games against Kilkenny in
Six,
all
as far as I know.
competitions. Sorry, 9 out of 13. 9 out of 13 they've won, are undefeated. So, like, since we talked about it last week, since he's come to Wexford, the success rate is just gone up over 60% in the games where it was at between 8 and 10% before he was there under Wexford and Wexford and Kilkenny since Cody started. So, like, it's just amazing to see. It's a league game in February, but there's massive crowds. There's a massive buzz about it. There's a massive feel good factor around Wexford hurling at the moment, and I think like Davy's already kicked on a small bit in his fourth year now. You know, he's had a couple. He's had a big result now. So now they hopefully can kick on again, and they have a lot of their best frontline players back again. I was impressed with some of the newcomers as well, particularly Joe O'Connor, who was just bursting out with ball at cornerback and showing an unbelievable energy. So yeah, Wexford probably is the big take home from the weekend. It looks like they're going to kick on a bit again.
Well, the lad I was really impressed with as well, Joe O'Connor. Like, he was definitely really good. And Wally Walsh got out in front of him for an awful lot of ball. And I'd say that's sort of something where Davy is thinking, is this a matchup that'll work for me in the summer? And we'll see, because things obviously change when the weather changes. But like, just the last maybe 20 minutes of the game, 15 to 20 minutes of the game, Wexford outscored Kilkenny 5 points to 7. And Kilkenny very much struggled to score from play. Like, Paddy Deegan got one. Other than that, there was like a foul around midfield, and I think Joe O'Connor did a late flick, and it meant a free from where the ball landed very close to the goal. But Kilkenny really struggled in the latter stages. Like, no score from play in the last 20 odd minutes. Uh, like, do we read too much into it, or do we say TJ Reid will be back, Colin Fennelly will be back, Pádraig Walsh will be back, and they'll be fine?
Yeah, yeah, I wouldn't be reading too much into it, to be honest with you. You're going down through their team and you're thinking they're missing at least 7 or 8 starters, and they're missing 4 or 5 really, really, really big players, particularly up front. You know, they're missing probably a whole half forward line. The guts of a whole half forward line, and Colin Fennelly inside as well. There's an awful lot of players to come back, particularly players that are going to bring the ball forward, even the likes of Conor Fogarty and that as well. I wouldn't be reading too much into it, but it's a nice win for Davy, and you could definitely see that it did mean an awful lot to them. I think we kind of talked last week. I think his barometer with Wexford will always be Kilkenny, that he will always measure himself against them and want Wexford to measure himself against Kilkenny. And if you're measuring Wexford against Kilkenny in the last 3 or 4 years, they come out pretty impressively.
Kevin Foley's his continuing evolution as a sweeper is something that really interests me. Now, I threw that out on Twitter last night to Pádraig Fanning, the former Waterford manager, and he didn't necessarily see it as evolution. He was just like smart players playing in the right positions. But to me, it seems like Kevin Foley's I don't know, his nose for when to attack is improving, because like right at the end he got up the right wing. He was, I think, inside the far 45 of Kilkenny, and then 2 minutes later he's down spoiling a couple of attacks at the other end. He seems to really kind of know when to go, because how often do Kilkenny get through for goal chances? I mean, obviously Billy Ryan got that chance that he buried early in the second half, but that was a mistake with Joe O'Connor getting turned over. It was Simon Donoghue getting turned over. But other than that, Kevin Foley always seems to know when to be back, and he's has to do some amount of hurling going the other way, so that the best of both worlds with him.
Yeah, he loves going forward. He's a natural attacker. I saw him scoring 6 points from play, and I think it was a Leinster under-21 semi-final a couple of years ago. He's brilliant going forward. I think it's smart as well to give him that license. Well, I think they're smart enough to realise that when he goes, it's like you know the old classic two midfielders in football. When he goes, you stay, and it's just like when Kevin Foley is gone, other lads seem to kind of pull back. When Simon Donoghue or Damien Wrecker and these guys are gone forward, other lads seem to pull back. So they played very smart. But Kevin Foley's very good on the ball. He's well capable of, like, he had a goal chance at one stage as well. A good save, in fairness. He's well capable of getting forward to pitch in with a couple of scores. So it's smart in that respect. But you have to have serious athleticism and serious mobility to do what he's doing at both ends of the field. Because, like, without being smart, if me or you or most normal people went forward like that, we'd be dragging our arse for 5 minutes trying to get back to where he was, whereas he's back there for the next play again. They have a serious athleticism as well, and I think a lot of that's what their game is underpinned. Like, people can talk about work rate and stuff like that. Yeah, you get the work done if you have the work done in your legs to get back and get that flick or whatever. So we talked about before as well. They're at a perfect age. They're not really carrying anyone. They're not saying, oh, if we get 60 minutes out of someone. Everybody is at the sort of age where they can get 75 to 80 minutes out of them. So I think athleticism is one of the things that underpins their game, and then there's that bit of cuteness. Paul's probably right. It is smart players as well. A smart player realises when to go forward. A smart teammate realises when to drop back and cover for him as well.
I wonder, is there anyone who's able to do that? That's sort of, we call it an attacking sweeper all the way he is. Pádraig Walsh is a little bit different when he's the spare man for Kilkenny, because it's not really quite the same. Now, there is an element of standing back on the D and protecting if the other team does have someone withdrawn up the field, but just thinking like Limerick, for example, like Declan Hannon, you wouldn't see him that often bursting up the wings. You might see him go up the centre, middle of midfield, and take a point from there. But I'm wondering, does anyone else do it, like Pádraig Maher or Ronan Maher, when they're doing it for Tipperary? Don't really think, like, is there anyone who really compares doing that role in that way?
Not really, but I think that's a lot to do with the fact that nobody probably looks at the role the same as the way Wexford do, if you know what I mean. They're looking at the sweeper as the minder of the house. If you can get forward or put one over from range like Pádraig Maher does or like Pádraig Walsh does, great, but your primary function is to stop goal chances. Whereas Kevin Foley, you could... it's borderline what his primary function is. One of his primary functions is to break up play. Another one, I'd say Davy is saying to him, as much as I want you back here, I want you going forward. So he can kind of do both of them. Whereas I don't think the managers of a lot of those other teams and those players that we're talking about, I don't think that point has been stressed with them. I think safety is the point that's been stressed with them. So that's what makes it different again. And you can kind of see, you mentioned the word evolution. It does look like their plan is further evolving yet again, in fairness, and even their retention of possession at times, particularly against the Breeze, they weren't just going to hit a ball in just for the sake of it. They were, smart. They were playing ball across, particularly against that Breeze, like, as well. You're not just going to... You saw the way the ball was holding up in the Breeze. You're not just going to leave a ball in just for the sake of it and leave yourself at a disadvantage. So I think they're playing smart in that respect. But just with regards to the sweeper, I haven't seen anyone in club hurling or county hurling play the role quite like he does.
And for that reason, he's arguably their most important player, because Sean Murphy had been doing brilliantly as the sweeper, and everyone remembers that. It was at the Kilkenny game, he had 27 possessions playing a sweeper, but it seemed to not work for him as time went on. I think later in the championship in the following year, he had only 8 touches of the ball or something like that. So Kevin Foley, if he's out of the team, it's not like just anyone can slip in and do that role. Like, remember the All-Ireland semi-final in 2017, Waterford didn't have Tadhg de Burka, and it was like, oh no, the sweeper, the kingmaker back there, he's gone. But Dara Fives jumped in and did the exact same job. The sweeper just operates so differently with them. Quick word on Paul Morris. Made his 100th appearance for Wexford, and I think a lot of the time people don't pay all that much regard to him because you've Conor McDonald, you have Lee Chin, players like that. But I think he's been a great servant over the year. He was knocking over frees for sport yesterday. Now, I would have thought maybe over the years he might have nailed himself as the main free taker. Maybe it didn't work out the odd day, but he's definitely been a fair servant.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it was 100 games, to be honest with you. It's amazing. I suppose between the way the round robin Leinster has gone and the amount of league games he's played, he's generally played nearly every game for Wexford under Davy, I'd say, barring if he picked up a knock here or there. Yeah, I was surprised it was 100 games. It's a week after Brian Malone had 160 appearances between hurling and football in Wexford as well. So it is a fair achievement. And like we said earlier, he's not particularly older. Like he's mid to late 20s, so he's another good handful of years left in him yet. But he has been a great servant. Like what I always think of Paul Morris is I always think of P Morris 0.0-3 because that's a lot of the time what he ends up with in games.
Just from a Kilkenny point of view, is there anything good that you take out of the game? Anything negative? Like Conor Brown was tried cornerback, and we saw him midfield last year for Kilkenny. Kieran Wallace played cornerback. Looks like a sturdy fella, well able to move as well, athletic enough. What else did they do? Conor Delaney was in wing back and he looked like he was a really good option last year before getting injured. So, I mean, as much as there's a lot of players to come back, there's a couple of guys who probably did themselves no harm.
Yeah, I think Conor Brown I think he could definitely make it as a cornerback because a lot of the time when he was playing midfield, he was kind of used as a stopper, and like he did with Cian Lynch in the All Ireland semi-final last year, and even he was very good in the All Ireland quarter-final as well against Cork. So I definitely think he could work there. I was quite impressed with him on the ball actually, and you don't have to be able to strike the ball 100 yards anymore as a cornerback. It's all about retention of possession. I thought Conor Delaney was very good on the ball yesterday, and he generally is quite good on the ball and composed on the ball. And he's got a good strike as well. It's good to see Killian Buckley back again. Looked like he was on the top of the ground as well. Looked like he was flying it too. In fairness, I'm kind of hearing that his knee problems are kind of been alleviated by some of the training that Mickey Comerford is doing with Kilkenny in this kind of new setup. He's obviously after replacing Mick Dempsey, so keeping him fit is massive as well. Billy Ryan again kind of shows flashes of what you want from a corner forward. Probably want to see a small bit more of it, but he has that kind of we talked about before. He has a hand, he has pace, and he's a good finisher. I'm expecting to see a good bit more of him this year. We saw glimpses of Richie Hogan as well, what he can do. I think Brian Cody would be delighted, and I think Richie would be delighted to get a good hour under his belt against top opposition. Like probably wasn't on the ball as much as he'd like to be, but when he was on the ball, a couple of like your prototype Richie Hogan points as well. So I think there's a good bit that they can take out of it too.
And then just moving on to some of the other results. Dublin 20 points, Carlow 9 points. Yeah, sure, we might as well just stop up at that game for a moment. The reason that I was quite impressed is, Dublin weren't that great in the first half, and I think they were playing with the wind in that half too, so you would have thought you need to be trying to get a nice bit ahead here, but they weren't. They did it without Danny Sutcliffe, they did it without Eamon Trollier-Dillon, and they did it without Liam Rush, who you would hope will come back okay from that ankle injury. So 20 points to 11 or to 9 point win. It's pretty good going considering things had looked so desperate after that heavy loss to a 14-man Kilkenny.
Yeah, it didn't look great. It didn't look great at half time, really, did it? You're kind of thinking just Carlow could really put it up to them here and serve it up to them in the second half. But in fairness to Dublin, they were just able to kick on. I didn't see that much of this game, but by all accounts, was it Davy Keogh, corner forward, got a couple of very good points in the second half.
Came on, did well.
Saw Sean Moran coming up and getting a point as well. Chris Crummey was you saw more of it than I did, but Chris Crummey was tried in a couple of different positions, wasn't he?
Well, he seemed to be, yourself, it can be hard to make out on telly, but to me he seemed like he was midfield, but he had a license to go forward. Maybe there was a little bit of interchange, and I know with Matty at times, he would definitely encourage midfielders to get forward, and like if they see a lane to go for it, and a centre forward at times might drop deep and sort of try and drag out the centre back again just to create those sort of lanes. But like Crummey's such a good athlete and he's so forceful and powerful that you could see the merit to putting him up there. Like last year against Laois, when Dublin had a few injuries, without doubt, it seemed like it would have been no harm to throw him up there. So without Rush, the whole thing with Keeney, I'm not sure if he's going to be back at all. but without Rush up there, and even Sutcliffe, who can win ball, maybe more so on the half forward line, a bit like where we might see Crummey. Dublin are lacking a couple of options up there at the moment. So when you have so many half backs like they have, with like Dara Gray is settling into it more, Sean Moran is settling into it, Shane Barrett, albeit taken off at half time, like he's an option too. There's probably no harm to at least try it. And now that they're going to be safe in the league no matter what after beating Carlow and Laois, Matty has a fair chance to experiment.
Yeah, I think to be honest with you, sometimes it's hard to be a bit of ignorance. I know it's different that he's playing wing back or whatever, and he's attacking the ball and they're coming at it in a different way. But if he's able to cope well going the other direction and with the ball coming down on top of him and a man coming in his back, and he's able to win a couple of possessions, he's definitely going to break ball. There's not going to be anybody who's going to catch ball over his head anyway, you'd imagine. So I think it's good to be looking for tactics like that, because you never know what different games maybe that could work in at different stages.
Rian McBride is somebody who, like, he's been on the radar for quite a few years in Dublin at this stage, and his couple of brothers as well. I would have seen with St. Vincent's over the years, but he got a nice few scores from play, named man of the match. I think he could definitely be a difference maker for them. And also, like, we've seen him midfield, wing forward. I've seen him full forward or kind of corner forward for the under-21s when it was an under-21 grade. I think he can be another option. As to who else kind of stood out, like Paul Ryan came on, got himself a few scores. We all know what he can do. Oisin O'Rourke didn't really have a great game, wasn't that involved. Mark Schutte wasn't that involved, and I'd like to see a bit more out of Mark. He'll love me for saying that. But Davy Keogh came in, had that bit of sort of dash about him as well. So there are a few options cropping up for Dublin, but as regards having someone that close threat to goal that can transform your team, so obviously Matty would love to get Conor Callahan in there, but like there aren't many of those around for counties in general around the country. So it is hard to know what do you have any idea what to make of Dublin and what we'll see for them come summer? Because I'm kind of thinking they'll be fiercely competitive. They'll probably run a few teams close, but I still think they're probably lacking just that extra bit of quality up top.
Yeah, you're kind of thinking, what are you hoping that Dublin will accomplish in the league? You're hoping that they will, not necessarily unearth, but that we'll see particularly two lads in their full forward line that are going to do big damage, that are going to be able to bag goals for them, that are going to be real kind of poachers around the edge of the square. We haven't really seen that yet. And like we all know how good Dublin are from 1 to 9. It's 13, 14, 15 really where we need to see it.
Yeah, the other thing too, no Dara O'Connell this year, no Sean Tracy. So even midfield is a tough one for them, and maybe that's part of the reason why Crummey's in there. But like to do that without Sutcliffe and without Eamon Trolley or Dillon, like that's definitely encouraging. From Carlow's point of view, the very few scores put up in their first few games. I think it's something like 33 points from their first 3 games. So things aren't looking great at the moment.
No, and if you're looking at like 33 points average over 3 games, 11 points per game, you're looking at needing an average of 18 to 19 points to win any league game, realistically. And you're looking at needing an average of 21 or 22 to win probably any championship game. So it's not great. They haven't hit a goal yet, haven't really looked like getting a goal yet. Even Marty Kavanagh, I think opposition teams know that if they keep him relatively quiet and he doesn't get 1-2 or 1-3 from play or 4 or 5 from play, that they're going to be fairly comfortable against him, and that's kind of been the way that it's been so far. Chris Nolan obviously didn't play. He was playing the Fitzgibbon final the other night as well, which would have been a big loss for them. They can't really afford to be missing anyone, and they are missing some kind of frontline players, and they just struggle when they're missing anybody. It goes back to the lack of probably senior players. You're looking at 4 senior clubs realistically. If there's a couple of big injuries and they're missing anyone, they're going to struggle, and they are struggling so far. We said it from the outset. It's the Laois game for them, really. That is the game. If they can somehow get a result in that game, then they're avoiding a relegation playoff, and they're as good as safe. But if they don't, then they're looking like a relegation playoff against Westmeath, and then kind of that game defines their spring, basically. Then.
Just moving on to the other game, then Clare against Laois. You were away at watching football yesterday, so I don't know how much of this game you would have seen, but I think Laois weren't doing particularly badly in the first half. I mean, they were. I just have the scores here, but at half time they were 7 points to 4 down, but they more or less nailed everything that came their way. As the second half went on, they had their goal chances, kind of left them behind them. But I think in the overall, in the heel of the hunt, the fact that the game was fairly competitive, 17 points to 9, you wouldn't be all that concerned if you were Eddie Brennan, because, as you know, you've interviewed him this year as well, so you know the injuries he's coming up against.
Yeah, it was funny to hear Brian Lohan interviewed with RT after yesterday. He I think he looked like an unbelievably relieved man. He looked like they were after getting a fair kind of shock to the system, and it wasn't fake compliments either. He was very complimentary towards Laois. He basically said that Laois had out hurled him for the guts of an hour, and kind of Clare came a bit of a burst. And while the highlights last night on the League Sunday show maybe didn't reflect that much, it did look like it was just a couple of kind of Laois mistakes maybe that Clare kind of capitalised. Tony Kelly capitalised on a couple of mistakes and put over scores. But Laois seemed to play very well in what was like horrendous conditions, the worst of the worst down there. Like the West was very badly hit. I think we saw the scenes up in Hyde Park as well for Roscommon in London with the goals shaking, and Ennis wasn't too much better, to be honest with you. It looked like there was a hurricane, then the sun was shining, then there was a hurricane, and it's funny not so funny because I've been in a similar situation myself. Eddie Brennan said after that some of the Laois players had to get hot showers at half time to try and heat up, which just will tell you just how you don't do that unless you're literally. Sometimes you play matches and you go hurling and you literally cannot you can't feel your hands and you can't feel your feet, and it's not like it's easier with football. It's a big ball, you're able to get your hands on it, you're able to get kind of a bit kind of warmer, and it's not. I suppose the emphasis on touch maybe isn't as much, and if you can't feel your hands, number one, you can't strike the ball, you can't catch the ball, you can't do anything. So. A funny story, and I won't mention the boys' names, but there was an underage match, we'll just say in a club many years ago, and it was absolutely teeming rain, and two of the boys could not get warm. So at half time, they decided to, how should we say, urinate without. They decided to urinate on themselves, shall we say, to warm up.
On each other, or
no,
point at himself?
No, that's really sick. No, they just decide to urinate on themselves.
Ye awfully animals.
Who said they were off from Offaly?
They'd have to be from Offaly. This sounds like an Offaly story.
Yeah, I think it worked. I think they were both really warm in the second half. It's fairly horrendous now, to be honest with you.
And their man wouldn't go near him.
No, there you go, yeah.
Joel, I put up a tweet yesterday going on about how terrible the conditions are, and sort of said to people in general, threw it out there, what's the worst conditions you've ever played in? And I remember, well, there's two things that always come to mind for me. One was I was in a parish league game, and I don't know, I was 11, 12, whatever it was. I know I was quite young, but I had one of those flat top micro helmets, the big massive yokes, the big massive face guard,
astronaut helmet,
and flat on top. And I remember the rain just coming down. It was just coming down in sheets, but it was kind of almost, it was sitting on top of the helmet, and every so often, you'd move your head forward or whatever, and a sheet of water come down over your face. There was something like 60, 70 comments in terms of people explaining the most horrendous conditions they played in. Do you have any particular day that sticks out for you?
Oh, Jenny, there's nothing particularly that comes to mind. But Niall Claffey, that used to hurl with Burr, started telling me we used to play fairly deep into the winter. So he always did the builder's kind of trick, the construction worker's trick beforehand. Basically, douse his hands in cold water, and you have that horrible, horrible sensation where you literally feel like your hands are going to fall off, and then they warm up and you feel great. But you have that horrible couple of minutes, and I'd much rather have that before a match starts than have it during the match. Do you know what I mean? Is there any particular incident? Or no, not really, no.
Well, I'll tell you one other one that I did. It was a challenge match with Coola. I'd say it's possibly Matty Kenny's second year, around 2015, we'll say. A game against Crumlin in Bray. And whatever way, it was on the AstroTurf too. So the rain was coming in sideways across the field. And afterwards, I remember being in the shower like that, and the way you're afraid to get into hot water after being so cold because it would just start stinging. And just my hands were drunk with the cold. And it was the most miserable match we ever played in. And then we were made do a load of runs after it as well because it was sort of pre-season time. I think that was up there with some of the worst stuff as well. Nothing particularly crazy happened, but it was just pure nastiness.
It's grand as a back, though. To be fair, it's grand playing those games as a back because all you need to do is just get the ball to somebody else. Whereas if you're in the forward line, you actually have to have a bit of skill about you and like put a ball over for 50 yards or something like that. Even though you can't feel your hands or legs or anything, you know. So that's one of the benefits of being, you know, kind of a far from Rolls Royce defender.
Actually, just speaking of defenders, I was looking at the spine of this Clare defence, and I did a video about it last night, but wanted to get your thoughts. If you were told as a Clare man that the spine of your defence this year was going to be Shane Golden at 3 and Cathal Malone at 6, do you think this is the sort of team that can kick on? Now, we know that they've moved David McInerney up the field, David Fitzgerald, who wasn't 6 anyway, but that he's up centre forward. Tony Kelly's in midfield as well. So like there's parts of that where it's like a spine of the team that sounds really good. But 3 and 6 there, Golden and Malone, what do you make of that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, Shane Golden was very good, particularly throughout the league last year as a midfielder, and as a midfielder who actually breaks the tackle a lot and breaks the line a lot, and seemed to get himself in a lot of good goal scoring positions. Carl Malone would be, in my view, kind of more of a spoiler, really. So maybe they're looking at possibly, I wouldn't say long term they're looking at him centre back, but they could be looking at him maybe for particular assignments throughout the summer, maybe, or to mark certain players. Like the last day, it was Conor Cleary and Pat O'Connor at 3 and 6. But the one thing that has been consistent, in fairness, is that they look like they're going to hurl David McInerney out the field. And he will do an awful lot of graft out there, and he probably will allow Tony Kelly to flourish a bit more. But in saying that, he's the sort of lad that could get 2 or 3 from midfield very, very easily as well. Particularly if he's, I guess, any ball on that right hand side, 100 yards out, he could easily put it over. It looks like they're going to stay with him there, which is an interesting one. I would have always said it's grand having him 3, but I just don't think he's in the games enough. I would have him 6. I would have him 5 or 6, to be honest with you, or possibly 8 as they're playing him now. I think the centre defence will change again. There'll be a lot of jiggery pokery before we see who they're actually going to play there. I'd say it's probably more likely to be Conor Cleary and Pat O'Connor than the 2 lads that played yesterday.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, is that kind of just, I don't know, rearranging the deck chairs to some degree? Like, is there anything that makes you think that Clare can kick on? I mean, it's not like so far they've played Laois, they've played Wexford, and that was a very good win in Wexford, and they've played Carlow. Wexford were without some of their main men that day, you know, Lee Chin, Matt O'Hanlon, D. O'Keefe. Do we know a whole pile about Clare at this stage?
Not really, no, not really, to be honest with you. If they'd been in the other division, we'd probably know a good bit more about them, to be honest. Like they've Wexford is the one game, with due respect to Laois and with due respect to Carlow, they were always going to win those games anyway. So then the Wexford game, there was a gale blowing down Wexford Park, as there always is. So I don't think we've learned anything really about Clare, to be honest with you.
Just moving on to the Cork Westmeath game. So Cork probably thought they'd win it a bit less fuss than this to win 3-12 to 114. One of the big things that stood out from the game is that penalty that I think it was Seamus Harnedy won. He was dragged down rugby style. We saw also Podge Collins pull back for what probably should have been a penalty in the Laois game. And you see a huge amount of people throwing a fit of the vapours on Twitter. Black card. People say there's no cynicism in hurling. No, we need a black card. Fine, I think everyone knows there are cynical fouls in hurling. I mean, I'm sure you've played in the back line as I have, where someone's sprinting through from the opposition and you roar, bring them down. Like, everyone knows the cynicism does exist, but just stop trying to apply a rule that has, like, in many ways doesn't work in Gaelic football to hurling. They're different games. You don't need the exact same rules. And when I say it doesn't work in football, especially when it was just you could substitute someone up until this year now, you know, the sin bin, that's definitely an improvement. But the idea that in the last minute of a game that you still wouldn't just take the black card, you would obviously take a guy being sent off for 10 minutes rather than someone going through for a one-on-one. And like, whereas I'm saying, like, give a penalty for a cynical foul. A clear cynical foul has to be a penalty. That is the ultimate deterrent, because no one's going to do it. The whole reason for cynical fouls is to stop goals, stop scores. So if you punish them with like a penalty attempt, that'll knock it out overnight. Just the idea of the black card, and that's why I go after people every time they say it online, because I'm like, I want to shut this down as much as possible because I think it's nonsense. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, not a fan of the black card at all. Not a fan of something that I don't think is implemented that well in another code. I don't see why we should be copying another code and bringing in something like that. These people that say, and people say there's no cynicism in hurling. I've never heard anybody say there's no cynicism in hurling. Anybody that thinks that is an absolute clown, to be honest with you, because there's cynicism in any competitive sport. There's cynicism like in tennis. There's cynicism in golf. There's cynicism in everything. Of course, there is.
Do you know what?
The one thing,
the cynicism, the amount of cynicism that happens is directly related to how much you can exploit the rules. And we know in like Gaelic games, the tackle isn't really fully defined. No one knows what it is, so everyone sort of pushes the limits as much as they can. And if there's no massive deterrent to pulling someone down, running through the centre, of course people are going to keep doing it. So yellow card and penalty, I mean, I think that would blot things out overnight. Of course there'll be problems with referees not interpreting the rules correctly. I mean, that happens anyway. That happens with black cards. No matter what the actual rule book is, referees are going to apply it wrong. But if you've got a deterrent that's over the top, that'll just largely blot it out overnight. But I see other people saying then, well, what if you missed the penalty? But like, the flip side is to me, right, if I put you down to 14 men with a black card, what if you outscore me in those 10 minutes? Like we saw Tip beat Wexford after being down to 14 men, 5 points behind. They go and win the All-Ireland semi-final. Kilkenny Hockey Dublin with 14 men. Fitzgibbon Cup final, UCC win with 14 men. So no matter what happens, you have to make the best of it. If it's a penalty, you have to score it. If it's 14 men, you're going to have to outscore the team. But I just think hitting them on the scoreboard, that's the way to blot it out overnight.
Yeah, I kind of thought about it a couple of weeks ago, and I kind of think a lot of it is a lad being dragged down maybe 15 or 16 yards out or something like that going through. And, there's a chance of a goal, which is 3 points, obviously. And he just has to take a free from the 21. And nobody really goes for goals from 21s anymore because you can't bring the ball in. So it's a tap over point. So I was kind of thinking that if you just redefined the boundary for a penalty even, it could work as well. So if you brought it to the 21-yard line and brought it to... You're basically bringing it's the large parallelogram out to the 21-yard line. You're just redefining the penalty area, shall we say. So if it's a cynical foul, then anywhere inside that, it's a penalty. And I think that's fair enough, because goal chances in hurling can obviously happen from a bit further out maybe than football as well. So you can get a strike, you can be 20 yards out, it could be a really good goal scoring chance, and you could be dragged down. I think a penalty would be a very good deterrent for that, for me. A penalty, as you say, and a yellow card. So I would just redefine the penalty area, to be honest with you, to try and, I suppose, just negate maybe this kind of cynicism.
Yeah, well, one thing's for sure, just the idea of black card. There's black card in one. Let's not think about what the options could be. Let's just go ahead and apply the black card because it's in another code. I think it's insane. Quick word on Westmeath.
Tell you what I want to see. The standing committee on playing rules, is that what they're called? So they would have suggested this. They would have brought in this motion. But there's always theory behind what they're bringing forward to Congress. There usually is theory behind what they're bringing forward. So even with the advance mark, there was some sort of theory on it. Whether you like it or not, there was a theory on it. The hand passing rule that they brought in last year for pre-season competitions, there was theory behind it. So I want to see what the theory is behind this. I haven't seen it yet. I've seen people talking about a couple of incidents here and there, but give me the theory behind this. Why they want to bring it in? What are the facts, or what are the stats, or what are they operating off? Because I haven't seen it yet.
Well, I've been in a couple of explainers for different sort of the motions that are going ahead to Congress in the coming weeks. Stuff like, one of the proposals is that you can hold the ball for 2 seconds rather than 4 steps in hurling. Again, whether it's 4 steps or 2 seconds, it's down to the ref actually applying the rules correctly. I wouldn't change that. I think it's another absolute nonsense. I was at a playing rules discussion, attacking mark and this sort of stuff, this sort of clarification of these new rules a few months or maybe a month ago or something like that. And what stood out to me is, I don't know how much thought has been put into the unintended consequences of these rules, because I was asking about the attacking mark in football. When you catch that, you have to wait for the referee to blow the whistle, and then you can put your arm up. But you're like, that could take a second to to happen, and in the meantime a defender could have cleaned you out, and he'll go, well sure, I didn't hear a whistle, I didn't see the arm go up. And I just don't know, like that's only one example. I just don't know if people think enough about the unintended consequences of these rules, and they're just so determined that we need to do something, and I need to have a legacy, and I need to make an impact. So that's why I'm just so determined to hammer anyone who goes on about the black card, and at least make them tease it the whole way out, because I find so many of them go, okay, well, fine, maybe not the black card, but something has to happen. Well, all right, at least we've gotten the black card out of your head, and that's kind of where I'm going with that. So we've probably punched ourselves out on that particular conversation. But a final word on Westmeath and Cork. Westmeath, after 3 games, minus 30 on the in terms of the scoring differential. Now that's still a fair sight better than Carlow in what you'd imagine is slightly weaker of the two Division 1 groups, who are on minus 48. But Westmeath minus 30 after 3 games, not all that surprising. Shane O'Brien's first year there as well. At least they pushed Cork pretty close there, because most people would have expected a bit of a spanking.
Yeah, that game was tight nearly the whole way. To be fair, Patrick Horgan got 2-8 from frees, 2 goals from penalties as well. It's not as if they went to town on them from play or anything like that. They were obviously missing a lot of the UCC guys that played Fitzgibbon or whatever during the week. But Shane O'Brien seemed very happy after, to be honest with you. Like, they were beating, what was it, 23 points last year? Could have been more. I think it was 23 points last year in the qualifiers. They've not saying they've got it down to 4, but they were far more competitive, and it wasn't like they were 10 down and got it back to 4. They were relatively close to them the whole way. He seemed quite happy after that, the quality games that they're getting, that they're finally getting up to the level of that. So from his point of view, I'd say he'd be quite happy. Kieran Kingston, as we said, obviously missing bodies, but not hectic from Cork now, in fairness. But you can't really judge them on that. It was awful conditions. You'll judge them more again when they play Limerick next week. Limerick are kind of the barometer for which most teams will be judged against at the moment. So we'll know a good bit more about Cork after this weekend. Interesting to see what they're going to have a full deck to choose from. Obviously, Owen Cadigan was back the other day as well. Interesting to see what to do with the full back position. Do they go for Robert Downey, or do they go for Owen Cadigan? It'd be interesting. This is going to be a fair measure of where they are at the moment. I'm still have an awful lot of question marks about them.
Great stuff, Michael. We'll leave it there. Cheers.
Cheers, Shane.